Hi, I'm Catharine Dann Roeber, and I work in Winterthur's Academic Programs Department. And today you're joining me in what we call the Kershner Complex, or the Kershner Room, one of them, the Kershner Kitchen. And some of you may know this, but for those who are not in the know, Winterthur has as a portion of the institution the museum with over 100 rooms filled with antiques and architecture that each sort of have a theme or a common thread. They're not meant to exactly replicate a historic room from an inventory, but they're meant to show off these wonderful collections that were put together by both Henry Francis du Pont and his advisors, as well as curators in the past and today. So we often get the question, where is the kitchen at Winterthur? And we have to say, we don't have the kitchen that Henry Francis du Pont used in the early 20th century. But what we do have here is this fascinating room that displays an open hearth, which would have been the kitchen in the 18th century for this Germanic house. So this is really interesting in terms of the rooms at Winterthur, because they not only look the way they do now, but they've often changed multiple times. So, as I said, this is the closest thing we have to a kitchen space, and it's always kind of been that way in this part of the house, and it's a really interesting story. So when the first Winterthur house was built here, the location of the kitchen was sort of generally where we're standing, and it stayed in that location in later versions of the house. In the 20th century, the kitchen moved upstairs to a room that is no longer a kitchen anymore. And then down here, there was a room that was installed called the Pine Kitchen. So when Henry Francis du Pont and his advisors and associates decided to furnish rooms, one of the kind of coolest things you could have in a historic house that had a historic architecture was a kitchen-like space with pine paneling. And so what did he do? He worked with skilled craftspeople and others to construct a pine kitchen in this very space. So now we might ask, where's that pine kitchen? Well, that left the building when Henry Francis du Pont and others collected a house from Wernersville, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour northwest of Philadelphia. And they brought architecture from it, from multiple rooms, and installed it in this location. So once again, we have another kitchen, but actually a kitchen, as I said, that represents from the 1750s to 1770s, that late 1700s in Pennsylvania, of a German-style house. So we've got a large open hearth for cooking with displays of cooking utensils. Again, I said, this is to show off objects, not exactly how they were used. People did not lay out their iron cooking implements like this. This is a display to show it off. But you can imagine this as an open hearth with a fire, keeping this warm, cooking all the different kinds of food. But it's also really interesting in a German-style house, often the hearth or the hearth room had a piece that was sort of like central heating. So the fire was not only heating this space, but another space that's on the other side. And you'll see this rectangular opening. We're going to go and see where that leads. So we saw the open hearth on the other side of this wall. The rectangular opening on this side is a stove. This is cast iron plates that have been put together to create a stove. And what that does is, as I said before, create that central heating. So this room is benefiting from that one fire source with that big open hearth. So this space on the other side would be heated as well. This was often called in the Germanic arrangement the stove room. So we saw how the stove comes through that wall from that central hearth. But the rest of the room is equally fascinating. So in some forms of traditional Germanic architecture, you have that hearth room, the stove room, and a third room called a chamber in English as the translation. In this room, they've actually combined that stove room and the chamber. So it's one large space here. Now, this architecture was moved from the house in Wernersville, Berks County, Pennsylvania. Again, that's about an hour northwest of Philadelphia. And one of the extraordinary things about this architecture, and I'm sure that's why it caught people's eye, is this molded plasterwork ceiling. So you have a high-end farmhouse with this amazing plaster ceiling. Visitors love seeing this when they come to this room, and it's something that's really extraordinary and unexpected. The room itself, though, also holds a whole host of wonderful objects, from everyday things to really extraordinary objects. And these do not come from just one Pennsylvania German community. Winterthur's collection actually represents many different small communities and religious faiths and other types of groups of people. And this room has a combination of a lot of these objects, like so many of our rooms do. And some of the things that people are really interested when they come in this room, interested about, are this large schrank, which is a German word for a cupboard. It does come apart, and so it did not have to come in here in one piece. But the inlay on this is not wood, it's actually sulfur. And there's a lot of work that's going on to understand these. They often come from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania area, but they're really fascinating and beautiful. The other thing that we often think about with Pennsylvania German decorative arts and culture are these wonderful examples of painted furniture. And this is an extraordinary piece of Winterthur's collection. We have many examples. So this wonderful chest, also if you lift the lid, has a Fraktur, which is a painted certificate, still inside on the inside of the lid. So over on this side of the room, we see another example of painted furniture, this time a small box. But I also wanted to point out that Winterthur has fantastic collections of other types of Pennsylvania German objects, such as red earthenwares. So on the left-hand side, we have a red earthenware flower pot with molded decoration that's been applied. That's molded clay put on the sides there. So throughout Winterthur's collections, you can see a lot of these types of objects, including also painted certificates, painted furniture, architecture, and other things that represent Pennsylvania German life. So we've talked about how Winterthur is a museum that represents change over time. So this was a space that was originally a kitchen in the house from the 1830s here. It later changed into a first museum display of the pine kitchen. And then when this architecture from the Kershner house was acquired and installed, it created the spaces that you're seeing today. One other thing I wanted to point out is that, again, these are not rooms that exactly replicate the way a house would have looked or would have been furnished. However, Henry Francis du Pont and the early curators here really did value creating a space that looked as if people had either just been there or were just about to come into a room. So you see these settings, whether it's in the high-end, more British style rooms, or even in these Pennsylvania German rooms that look as if this is set for dinner, people are about to enter the rooms. So it gives us a little taste of what Winterthur is, which is, again, many different things, but in the museum, this series of rooms that reflect so many changes over time. And we really invite you to come and visit us and see for yourself these wonderful spaces.